How can the Bible say that Jesus faced all the same temptations that we do? Certainly he couldn't have. Certainly he did. He did. Here's why. Because all the temptations, all the testings, all the trials you can imagine fit very, very neatly into three broad categories. That's all of them fit into one of three broad categories. And the Bible wants to make this so clear that 3 times in the Bible, these 3 broad categories are listed starting in Genesis 3. From the fall of man all the way through the Bible, we see all sin fall into 3 broad categories. The first one is on the wall. You write it down in your margin. The first one is in Genesis 3, verse 6. Where Satan uses these same 3 categories of temptation to trigger the fall of man. Listen, you can take the same 3 categories of sin that you're tempted with, that Jesus was tempted with, and you can take it all the way back to the garden because it's the same 3 categories that caused the fall of man. The second one, going through the Bible, is here. We're going to use Luke 4, 1-13. Write that down. Luke does a great job of going through the details of the temptation of Christ, but you'll also see that the temptation of Christ also fell in the same 3 categories that triggered the fall of man. And then the third one's in 1 John 2, verse 16. Did you write all 3 of those down? Those are the 3 areas in the Bible where the 3 broad categories of all sin that you will face will be found. Let me read 1 John 2:16. It's on the wall in the ESV to get the concise language. 1 John 2:16 says, "For all that is in the world," that's everything you and I live in, "the desires of the flesh," that's the first category of sin, "and the desires of the eyes," that's the second category of sin, "and the pride of life," the big killer, the root of all sin. "And the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world." Those are the 3 all-encompassing broad categories of temptation. The desires of the flesh, see it's on the wall, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. Desires of the flesh are physical desires, our physical cravings. The desires of the eyes, what we see, that cause coveting and draw us into sin. And the pride of life, defined like this, which I love, the self-absorbed conceit of our own superiority. Listen, if you'll just crush pride, you'll be like 90% there to just overcoming the categories of sin, at least 80% there. Self-absorbed conceit of our own superiority. Every one of the temptations that Jesus faced squarely fit, perfectly fit in one of these 3 categories.